All right, today we are diving into a story that's got it all. A massive media personality, a terrifying rumor that went viral, and the hard data that tells a very different tale.
Let's kick things off with a number. 20.6 million. That's not total listeners, no. That's just the number of subscribers on YouTube for what is, without a doubt, one of the biggest podcasts on the entire planet. And of course, the guy at the heart of it all, Joe Rogan. You know him. He's gone from a stand-up comic to the voice of the UFC, and now he's a full-blown podcasting titan. The reach he has is just staggering.
So here's the question. What happens when a guy with that much influence moves to a new city right as a terrifying local rumor is about to just catch fire? Well, we're going to see exactly how that plays out. It's like a perfect storm, and the setting is his new hometown, Austin, Texas.
Okay, first things first. To really get what went down in Austin, you've got to understand the size of this megaphone. We're not just talking about a podcast here. It's a cultural force, a phenomenon with its own kind of gravity. And if you want to put a dollar amount on that kind of influence, boom, $250 million. That's the rumored value of his 2024 Spotify deal. That number isn't just about how many people listen. It's about how massive, how engaged, and how incredibly loyal his audience is. And look, this didn't just happen overnight. This whole empire was built piece by piece. We're talking starting out in Boston comedy clubs way back in '88, then becoming the literal voice of the UFC in '97. You probably remember him hosting Fear Factor in 2001. But the real game changer, launching his podcast in 2009, way before it was the cool thing to do. So by the time he packed up and moved to Austin in 2020, he wasn't just a podcaster. He was his own media empire.
But, you know, with that kind of reach comes a whole lot of controversy. Rogan's show is famous, or infamous, depending on who you ask, for being a place where literally anything goes. Any topic, any guest, any viewpoint, it's all on the table.
And this is where things get kind of complicated, right? It's a paradox. On one hand, he says he's socially liberal. He's for things like same-sex marriage and universal health care. But on the other hand, he gets hammered with criticism, accused of pushing conspiracy theories, and giving a massive platform to people spreading misinformation, especially about things like COVID-19.
And yeah, just to give you a taste of how unfiltered things can get, here's a direct quote from a recent show. I'll just let it speak for itself. It's that raw, unvarnished style that millions of people tune in for. But it's also exactly this kind of thing, these inflammatory, often totally baseless claims that his critics say is just reckless and super problematic.
So you've got this backdrop, right? This atmosphere of controversy, of unfiltered talk. And that's exactly when a local rumor in Rogan's new city starts to bubble up and then go global. And this, folks, is where our story takes a really fascinating and kind of dark turn.
So here's the rumor that started spreading like wildfire. In Austin, there's this popular nightlife spot called Rainy Street, and the story was that a predator, a serial killer, was stalking young men there. Their bodies would turn up later, drowned, in the nearby Lady Bird Lake. The theory even got a chilling name, the Rainy Street Ripper.
And the myth just built on itself, you know? It had all the pieces of a terrifying story. The target, young men out at night. The method, being pushed into the lake. But the real fuel for this fire, social media. It just blew up on TikTok and Reddit. And before you know it, a Facebook group dedicated to solving this case swelled to over 50,000 members. 50,000 people.
Okay, so this is really the core of it all. We have this incredibly powerful, viral story on one side. So now, let's see what happens when we hold it up against the cold, hard data.
All right, so the rumors were just out of control. So researchers at Texas State University teamed up with the Austin police and said, okay, let's do a serious deep dive into the actual cases. The big question is, what did they find when they actually ignored the chatter and just looked at the facts?
First up, let's talk location. The rumor was all about Rainy Street, right? Laser focused on it. But the data, and we're talking data from over 2 decades of drownings, it tells a totally different story. Turns out, way more bodies were found near places like Auditorium Shores and Barton Creek. These are spots with more people around and easier access to the water. In 21 years, only 8 deaths were even in the Rainy Street area.
And from there, the study just took the whole myth apart piece by piece. So was there a big recent spike in drownings? Nope. The numbers were pretty consistent over the years, and the peak year was actually way back in 2015. Any evidence of foul play? Not a shred. The medical examiners ruled all 58 relevant cases as accidental deaths, every single one. Was there some kind of serial killer pattern to the locations? Nope, that didn't hold up either. And finally, and this is a big one, is drowning people even a common thing for serial killers to do? Turns out it's incredibly rare. It accounts for a tiny, tiny fraction of murders in the US, just 0.2%.
So you have to ask, right? If there was no killer, what on earth was going on? Well, the study brings up this really interesting psychological concept, apophenia. It's basically our brain's tendency to see patterns and connect the dots even when there's no real connection there. You have a few tragic but completely unrelated accidents, and a really compelling story links them together, and our brains just run with it.
But, it's not just about our brains being weird. There's a bigger systemic problem here, too. See, local police departments reporting crime data to the FBI, that's voluntary. So you end up with these gaps in the official data, a lack of clear info. And that creates a vacuum. And what fills a vacuum better than a good rumor or a conspiracy theory?
So you might be thinking, okay, so what's the big deal? It's just people talking online, right? Well, not exactly. As we're going to see, these viral myths have real-world costs.
Remember this number? 50,000 plus. That's more than 50,000 people. I mean, just stop and think for a second about the sheer amount of collective time, energy, and frankly fear that was poured into this one single theory.
That is an entire online community, mobilized, acting like amateur detectives. They're spending hours staring at maps, sharing so-called evidence, and just pumping fear throughout a major city, all of it in a hunt for a killer that the data says just wasn't there.
Okay, now hold that thought, and let's look at a different number, 23,000. What's that? Well, according to the Murder Accountability Project, that is the number of actual, real, unsolved murder cold cases in this state of Texas alone.
And this right here is the whole point. The researchers behind the study said it perfectly. Think about it. All that energy, all that public outcry, all the police time and resources that went into chasing down this rumor, all of that could have gone towards solving some of those 23,000 real cases. Cases with real victims and real families who are still waiting for answers. And so all of this leaves us with one big final question. Yeah, this story involves one of the biggest media platforms on the planet, but it's not really just about Joe Rogan. It's a perfect case study for the world we live in now. We're in an age of endless information, where huge personalities have massive influence, and our brains are hardwired to look for patterns. So the question for all of us is, how do we get better at telling the difference between a real pattern and just tragic random noise?